coincidence that I am here today to speak to you about the environment, because yesterday, as we all know, was the birthday of Mother Earth. And according to Dave, he really made sure that I was your speaker today so that we speak about a very serious matter which is affecting our everyday life. It is therefore with great pleasure that I take part in this gathering to encourage you Rotarians to take a more active role in finding solutions to the growing social, economic, and development challenges caused by environmental degradation and disasters arising from natural hazards made stronger by climate change. I think we can put it on. Yes. We are living in a world with finite resources, and yet generations have lived over the centuries like there is no tomorrow. Our natural environment has been compromised. Our biological diversity has been significantly reduced, and the general health of our environment is conceded to the greed of some. Our ecosystems have been altered more rapidly in the name of development. But the poor have remained poor. Their numbers are increasing, notwithstanding the emergence of megacities in the increasing GDPs of nations. The UNEP, or the United Nations Environment Program, which is based in Kenya, but whose executive director, Akim Steiner, was here during President Hollande's recent visit. They've outlined how the environment has actually drastically changed in just a span of 20 years since '92, when the first UN Conference on Sustainable Development, or the Rio Earth Summit, was convened in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And let me just outline some of the major tasks of that first Earth Summit. At that time, not even updated to the present, half of the 7 billion human population lived in urban areas and account for 75% of global energy consumption, as well as 80% of global carbon emissions. Second, the global use of natural resource materials, primarily biomass, fossil fuels, ores, industrial minerals, construction minerals, has already increased from 42 to 60 billion tons annually. Third, the primary forest area has decreased by 300 million hectares since 1990, and the continued conversion of forests into agricultural land and other uses results in biodiversity loss and further contributes to global warming. Deforestation has also caused a 30% decline in biodiversity in the tropics. The increase in carbon dioxide concentrations in the air has been causing oceans to become more acidic, threatening marine organisms and ecosystems, which in turn greatly affect fishing, tourism, and other marine-related human activities. The warming of the Earth's atmosphere has caused the increasing melting of glaciers, which not only influences sea level rise, but also affects the water resources of 1/6 of the world's population. Global fish stocks continue to decline as a proportion of fully exploited fish stocks increased by 13%, while overexploited, depleted, or recovering stocks increased by 33% since 1992. These numbers highlight the need for better management of marine environment. The effects of our overexploitation are evident in the increased frequency and volume of what we call natural hazards. We have seen many times the impact of natural hazard extremes and the prevalence of disaster risk, exacerbated by climate change. They kill thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of families, wipe out our cities and communities, and undo years of development gains. We've seen how Ondoy in 2009 affected Metro Manila. We've seen how Sendong and Pablo clobbered Mindanao. We've seen how Haiyan in 2013 adversely affected 53 provinces in the Philippines. The years from year 2000 to 2011 saw 1.1 million people perish and another 2.7 billion individuals suffer due to disasters. Disaster caused $1.3 trillion worth of economic damage worldwide. Each year, 5 billion lives are lost due to climate change and the health impacts of its chief driver, which is fossil fuels. The World Health Organization estimates direct damage caused to health alone at between $2 to $4 billion each year by the year 2030. We see it in upper respiratory ailments, in pulmonary diseases, which many of us suffer from, including my good friend Dave, and many of us. Some of us knowingly, the others are not aware of it. As early as the late 1800s, science has been trying to give us dire warnings that industrial coal burning enhances the greenhouse gas effect. The warnings remain unheeded, notwithstanding the impervious voice of science. In fact, the world's actions of the past decades betrayed the fundamental merits of these warnings. The fifth assessment of what we call the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, upheld this observation by concluding that, and I quote, about half of the anthropogenic CO2 emissions between 1750 and 2011 have occurred in the last 40 years. The world will indeed continue to become warmer, and with this comes along lasting changes in our climate system. Ordinary people have limited understanding of this until they are painfully introduced to the impacts via extremely harsh weather events, flooding, declining fish catch, water scarcity, declining agricultural harvests, exacerbating health issues, the extinction of animal and plant species, the displacement of people, and even the demise of low-lying areas, among others. Many years ago, if not decades ago, people would tell me, "You're never understood. It does not affect us. It is an issue of environmentalists alone." But when farmers see the decline in their harvest, when the agricultural workers feel the drought, when they feel the effects of both La Niña, flooding, and El Niño, they see that climate change and environment are actually a stomach or a gut issue. When the businessmen see that their businesses are affected by not being prepared, by the absences of their staff, when businesses are blown away, literally and figuratively, by strong winds due to natural hazards like typhoons, they feel the extreme impact, adverse impact of climate change. The Philippines is always at the top of the list of the Global Climate Risk Index of 2015, the latest list of countries most affected by weather-related disasters like storms, floods, and heat waves. The top 10 countries are all developing nations, underscoring the fact that the vast majority of these impacts are felt in developing countries because they are the least prepared to deal with the climate crisis. We already have numerous laws and policies that are focused on addressing environmental, climate change, and disaster resilience issues. In fact, if I may, in my 3 terms, and this is my 3rd term till 2019, I have already put in place all the most important laws on climate change and environment. If I may just state a few: the Philippine Environmental Impact Statement System, the Marine Pollution Control Law, the Clean Air Act of 1999, the Clean Water Act of 2003, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Law of January of 2001. One of my important laws is that RA 9003, so that our garbage, tons and tons, millions of tons of garbage should be segregated at source, recycled, and compost. I wonder if this institution, the Polo Club, I wonder if your offices and your homes and your villages, subdivisions, barangay, are actually segregating waste at source, recycling, and composting, and not doing it in rivers and open dumps, etc., which are outlawed by now. The Renewable Energy Law of 2008, the Environmental Awareness and Education Act, the Climate Change Law of 2009, which created the Climate Change Commission, which is tasked with our negotiations in climate meetings of the world, which will be discussed in the Conference of Parties in Paris in December of COP21. The National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act, which created the NDMC Council, which is charged with our preparedness. The Toxic Substances and Hazardous Act, etc. The Act creating the People's Survival Fund, among many others. These laws, however, do not guarantee effective action. While the United Nations has lauded the country's laws on climate change, which I mentioned, and the environment and disaster risk reduction as, and I quote, the best in the world, it also must be noted that the challenge actually is to translate these well-meaning and well-crafted national policies, plans, and programs into local actions with measurable gains. And we lawmakers cannot do it alone. We need the cooperation of the executive, of the private sector, of the business sector, of industry, of local governments, of each and every local government unit in our country. In the Senate, we are proposing to institutionalize within the government bureaucracy a Philippine economic, environmental, and natural resources accounting, which will also take into consideration the role of both natural and environmental resources and their impact on the country's economy. The objective of the PINRA system is to incorporate both environmental and non-environmental economic inputs and outputs for policymakers to make responsive, relevant, and effective laws, plans, and programs necessary for national development. We are also proposing amendments to the NIPAS Act, that's the National Integrated Protected Areas System. In 1992, long before I became a senator, there was a law enacted, the NIPAS, which declared, I think, more than 113 protected areas. Of these 113 protected areas, each was supposed to have been assessed and gone through a process so that they could become a national park, so that there could be a management for the protected area and legislation to fund the protection of that. Unfortunately, only 13 have proceeded to be legislated as such. That is the reason why I am working on the 100 for this year, so that all the 113 of 1992 would be legislated as a national park. The proposed amendments adopt the lessons learned from the implementation for the past years of the NIPAS Act. It integrates practical measures that strengthen the implementation of our country's law on protected areas. If enacted, local communities and other stakeholders will have the legal basis and the incentives to participate in the management and the protection of the areas. Laws, however, are just part of the equation, and their implementation through good governance could spell a big difference. Solutions for climate and resource risks entails investing in water supply, in sanitation, in flood control, in transport, roads, social and health services, energy infrastructure that build resilience to climate variability. Our laws and our circumstances that led to their passage must be appreciated by everyone. Effective enforcement emanates from everyone's understanding and appreciation of what we call responsibility and accountability. Protecting our environment is not the duty of the government alone. It is everyone's responsibility. It is thus important to put communities at the heart of relevant programs and policies, and to gather collective action that is rooted in a sense of solidarity and shared responsibility. Yesterday, we celebrated Earth Day, and as I conclude my lecture for today, I wish to impart this message. We all live in one Earth. Climate change is now in our midst, and its impacts to us, imparts to us the lesson that we do not own this planet. We are mere dwellers and stewards of its finite resources. Each of us has opportunities to make a difference for our future. We must take hold and seize that opportunity to responsibly manage our environment and to build a sustainable, resilient, and healthy nation. And let it be said that during our watch, as leaders of our nation and as leaders of business and industry and of our respective communities, let it be said that we did something to help improve the state of affairs in our nation and to help leave behind a better planet. Thank you very much, and good day.